New Year's Eve 1999. I was hanging out with my ex-boyfriend and some friends, and we were excited because, it's New Year's Eve and a new century was about to begin. Not really, because fun fact, the new century technically began January 1st, 2001. Yes, really, look it up if you don't believe me. But everyone at the time was talking about how a new century was starting. Most people didn't know any better. There was no Google, and the media wasn't going to correct us because they got more attention from it. Y2K was also all over the news and had people glued to their TVs. And notice I say TVs and not phones or iPads. What a time, right? Anyway, here's a news clip from 1999.
We got specifics today on how ill-prepared America's computers are for the year 2000.
Today, a Senate panel reported that up to 40% of the country could be hit by power failures on New Year's 2000 because computers get confused.
Just to give you a refresher, because if you're like me, you're getting older and more forgetful, the whole potential problem, the reason Y2K was a thing, was that back when computer systems came into existence and up until people began to realize this was a potential problem, computer programmers used the last two digits to represent the year. They did this because back then computer memory and storage was incredibly expensive. So, to save space, computer programmers used the two digits instead of four. For example, 63 was used for 1963, 72 for 1972, etc. All of this may not seem like a big deal, but the potential problem was that when all of these computers switched over to the year 2000, their systems may have read the year as 1900, and no one was sure how the computers would respond to this. Would airplanes fall out of the sky? Would medical equipment stop working during surgeries? Would nuclear missiles go off on their own? Would credit cards and ATMs stop working? Would payroll systems stop working and employees not receive their paper checks? Remember those? Some of these fears seem to be valid. IBM sent a letter to the FAA saying, quote, "These systems won't work when the transition comes and there's no way to fix it." End quote. So they had to put new systems into place, which is scary in itself. I mean, personally, I wouldn't want to be on one of those first planes after the new system was put in, but I also wouldn't want to be on one of those first planes using the old system once 2000 rolled around. Another big problem I came across when reading about this is that some banking systems may have suddenly calculated interest based on 1900. This could be problematic for people with debt like mortgages, student loans, business loans, etc., because the computer might calculate the rate of interest for 100 years and apply that to the loan. So theoretically, someone could check their bank account on January 1st, 2000 and see this huge deficit. And then they would probably panic and call their bank or even go there in person. And then if you multiply this on a grand scale of people freaking out because their account is now showing a massive amount of debt, then that could lead to widespread panic. And when there's panic, that's never good. Some people would have wanted to withdraw all of their money, their original balance, and then that could have caused even more chaos and so on. And once you start a panic like that, it would have spread to other areas like fights over food and water, medicine, transportation, and so on. Now, the opposite could have happened as well if you had been earning interest. With a computer adding interest earned since 1900, you could suddenly have a huge windfall. And there was one instance where this happened, which I'll talk about in a bit. But this could have also prompted some people to withdraw money because suddenly they would have had this huge balance and thought, let me just discreetly take this out before anyone notices. Computer experts were just making educated guesses on all of this. No one was 100% sure what was going to happen, but since taking no action could have been catastrophic, most world leaders took the warnings of the computer nerds seriously. But not initially. Computer scientists had taken note of this possible problem as far back as 1958, when world-renowned computer scientist Bob Bemer stated that there could be a problem when we reach the year 2000. But it wasn't until 1996 that the US government ramped up their work to fix this bug. And in 1998, a President's Council on the year 2000 conversion was formed. Governments across the world, as well as most larger businesses, began to hire engineers to help fix the problem. The media learned what was going on, and as the date grew closer, it started to show up in almost every news segment. Here's another clip from 1999.
It's called the Y2K, or year 2000 bug. It's a problem that some fear could cripple the nation.
Everyone knows failure of Uncle Sam's computers would be chaos. Glitches in the air traffic control system, breakdowns in oversight of nuclear plants and weapons.
As you can see, the media loved all of this. I remember them talking about it almost every day. And it was on the cover of magazines like these I found from Time, Newsweek, and something called Weekly World News. Remember Time and Newsweek, by the way? I know they're technically still around, but I have to wonder if anyone really reads them anymore. And the fear showed up in other ways too, like the sticker that Best Buy put on some of their computers that said, quote, "Remember, turn off your computer before midnight, 12/31/99, end quote. Did Best Buy not learn anything from the Y2K bug? I mean, using 2 digits for the year on their sticker? Come on, Best Buy. I'm kidding, of course. Anyway, all of the media talk and warnings put some genuine panic in people, and some of them started to stockpile food, water, and some weapons. Here's another clip.
This is usually a slow time for Hinckley Springs, but not this year. Their retail business doubled, and delivery to homes and offices up 30%.
The risk by the last 6 months of '99 was there'd be a run on the bank, there'd be a run on gas, there'd be a run on food. That was as big a concern for us as anything.
Some communities across the U.S. actually formed Y2K groups. They would stockpile together, make pacts to help each other out if the worst happened, and talk through different possible scenarios. My partner and I didn't join any of these, but we did stockpile a little bit just in case. We bought extra food, water, and even toilet paper. And little did we all know back then that we would have to stockpile toilet paper again in 2020. But my ex-boyfriend worked at Microsoft as a programmer at the time, and he wasn't really concerned. He had faith that they would fix this. So that made me more calm about it. I was like, if he's not afraid, then it's probably going to be fine because this is his area of expertise. So back to what I mentioned in the beginning, New Year's Eve, 1999, I'm hanging out with him and 4 of our friends. We decided we should all be together just in case. We chose the house of 2 friends who had lots of certain weapons, if you know what I mean. We thought if things start to get crazy, we will at least have some sort of an advantage. And we were drinking champagne when the clock finally struck midnight. Our friends checked their computers, we all checked our phones. So far, so good. We flipped through the news and there was nothing but people celebrating. Everything seemed to be working just fine. Planes were still flying and on schedule. The banks were still functioning, and it appeared to be business as usual. Of course, we weren't sure, but we did all sigh with relief when it got to about 12:30 and nothing seemed to be going wrong. Of course, we wouldn't know for sure for a few days, but I remember just feeling so excited about the quote new century, but also that we didn't have to panic necessarily anymore. And that was exciting, but also, oh, things are back to normal. That means we have to go back to work and all that boring stuff. There was some comfort in knowing too, though, that even if there had been issues, a lot of companies had employees on standby that night in case anything went wrong. I read this article written by Wells Fargo, that shady bank that's committed all kinds of fraud, but is somehow still functioning. And they said this about that night. Quote, on New Year's Eve, bank operations staff watched computer screens in hubs across the nation. They monitored the situation day and night, ready to respond. Wachovia, which is now called Wells Fargo, had more than 500 dedicated employees on duty. As the hours ticked by with no issues reported, they celebrated both the new year and the satisfaction that years of preparation had averted a crisis that never came. I hope these people were paid lots of overtime. So had all of this been much ado about nothing? A lot of people were saying that, including this doctor who was interviewed afterward.
Certainly the flu bug has affected us much more than the Y2K bug, which I think is probably non-existent.
But there's documentation about how much time and money went into fixing the problem before it happened. I'm going to interrupt this episode for just a moment to tell you about my website, shop8099.com, where you can find various products with designs and phrases inspired by the 80s and 90s. I personally put a lot of thought into every design, and I don't use AI because I want them to come from me personally. Every sale helps support the channel, so when you get a chance, please check it out. That's shop8099.com, shop8099.com. The government and private companies had hired thousands of engineers to specifically fix this problem, and apparently it costs between 300 and 600 billion globally to update private and public systems, which meant it probably cost about 100 billion after the politicians took their cut. But anyway, it seems that nothing happened because a huge effort was made beforehand to ensure all major areas of finance, healthcare, transportation, government entities, etc. could continue as usual. Y2K author Paul Sappho said it best in this interview.
You never get credit for the disasters you avert, especially if you're a programmer and nobody understands what you're doing to begin with.
And he's right. People are always quick to criticize others, but not give them credit when they deserve it. And the people who deserved it were all those engineers and other staff who worked hard for months and months to avert what could have been a global disaster. Then some of those poor souls were promptly laid off afterward, and that's the thanks that they got. So I don't think Y2K was a hoax at all, but I will say even in countries where very little had been done to fix their software, problems were minimal. But I would argue that maybe it was because those countries weren't as reliant on computer systems back then as the US and other countries like it. So that could be a reason why they didn't experience major hiccups that we could have had if we had not taken action. In the end, a few minor issues occurred, some of them realized in the days just after January 1st. Like some retailers experienced issues with credit card terminals because their machines couldn't process cards with 2000 expiration dates. Another one was the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago had a delay in $700,000 in tax payments, which was resolved the next day. There was a nuclear power plant in Japan that had some alarms go off just after midnight, and geez, that's scary. Apparently someone had a $70,000 late fee show up at Blockbuster Video for 100 years of rental. Now that's just kind of hilarious. And then I came across this funny picture of an electronic sign in France that displayed the date as January 3rd, 1900. And I'm sure some people got a kick out of seeing that at the time. But the best glitch that I came across was how a man in Germany briefly ended up with the equivalent of 6 million in his account when a transaction date defaulted to the year 1899. Which I'm not sure how that happened, because wouldn't it have defaulted to 1900 like everyone feared? But what a nice surprise. I don't know what I would have done in that case if I had received 6 million from a computer glitch and it actually stayed in my account for a while. I probably would have waited at least 6 months to see if they noticed, and after 6 months be like, okay, maybe it's mine. Anyway, I'm sure there were some other minor glitches out there, but those are some that I came across that I wanted to share. But for the most part, the mix of fear and celebration that New Year's Eve 1999 brought for those of us who were there for it was gone in a matter of hours or days at the most, and life returned to normal. We hopped back on our working Windows 98 computers until they mysteriously crashed for some unknown reason that had nothing to do with Y2K. Returned to taking 10 minutes to type one sentence on our candy bar cell phones, and we started writing 00 for the year on our checks, which I remember doing, and I remember thinking it felt really weird after writing 9 something for so long. And then if you wrote out the whole year, that was really weird after writing 19 as the first 2 numbers for so long. Unfortunately, the Y2K problem isn't the last of major computer problems that need to be solved. In the year 2038, which some are already calling the Y2K 38 problem, there could be a much bigger issue than Y2K. I read this comment from a computer programmer on Reddit. He wrote, quote, "I'm more concerned about the year 2038 problem because that is a much harder fix and the clock is ticking, no pun intended. I don't know what the solution to that is going to be, but there is going to be a lot of stuff that ceases to function or to function correctly," end quote. I'm not going to try to explain why this is an issue because I'm not a programmer, but personally, I'm thinking they better get on that like today. Let's not procrastinate like we did last time, folks. Then again, with AI getting better and better, maybe we can just ask some AI program to fix it all in, say, 2035. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Let me know your memories of Y2K or New Year's Eve 1999. Where were you? What were you doing? Do you think Y2K was a hoax? Were you freaking out? Let me know below. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you'll come back, and in the meantime, take care.